So what do you know about the Rendlesham Forest Incident? It's one of the more notable and believable UFO sightings that's been outside of the USA, and to this day, nobody really knows what happened there. Let me know in the comments what you think about it, and let's dissect everything to do with it. So what happened? Well, dubbed Britain's Roswell, this forest mystery has captivated UFO enthusiasts ever since it took place like 44 years ago. So over 3 separate nights on Christmas, military personnel were convinced they had seen strange flashing lights near a Royal Air Force base in an area. So all these strange lights were reported by servicemen near Bentwaters, Woodbridge, all in Suffolk. Now, soldiers investigated what the lights were. We had Staff Sergeant Jim Burrows, Airman First Class Edward, we had a couple of other Airman First Class folks, and we also had a couple of Airman First Class officials. We're talking Edward, Larry, all out there looking around. These disputed sightings, over once again 3 nights between December 26th to the 28th, occurred when Britain and the West were on high alert during the Cold War. So, after witnessing some unexplained lights, we're talking not just those 3 guys, we had like several personnel, including Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, decided to head into the woods to get a closer look. Now, they were expecting to find a plane crash and be like, okay, that's what it is. Instead, according to Halt's memo, they saw a glowing metallic object that moved at a phenomenal speed through the forest. Now, the next day, servicemen returned to the site and they found triangular shaped impressions on the ground, broken branches on the trees, and radiation readings that were 10 times the normal background level, which is very dangerous. In 1983, a memo by Deputy Base Commander, so Charles Halt, was released by the US government describing an encounter with an apparent UFO. Now in 2010, by now retired, Lieutenant Halt signed a notarized affidavit that summarized the incident and accused the US and England of a cover-up. Now retired US Air Force officer Steve Longereau broke a 36-year silence in December of 2016 to reveal he also saw something in the night sky. Now Steve said the UFOs looked like red and green fluorescent lights hovering over treetops, which is normal at Christmas, and he also dismissed a theory that the lights had been caused by a lighthouse. Look, this whole incident became a topic of fascination in the UK after all those servicemen went into the forest to be like, hey, what's going on? And then they're like, nope, it's aliens. And these sightings kind of resurfaced claims from those living in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947, when an unexpected crash was alleged to have been the remains of a spacecraft and alien bodies. But this was rejected by the US military, following a close investigation into the wreckage. And if we're looking over on the UK soil, the British Ministry of Defense has also dismissed the claims regarding this forest. They're like, there's no threat to national security. It was probably just a series of nightlights. Now, there's been a lot of theories that have emerged about this night. We're talking pranks, the lighthouse, I mentioned that before. You even got some time travel in there. So while folks were allegedly convinced that these shapes were alien spacecrafts, it has since been brushed off as a prank played on the US Air Force by the Britain's Special Air Services, SAS. But since the UK's Ministry of Defense, which oversaw reports of UFO incidents until the early 2000s, didn't find any credible threat to the nation, they didn't pursue investigations further. But like similar to Roswell, tourism, especially UFO tourism, is very prevalent in this forest. There's even an official UFO trail that visitors can hike, and that's where you see a model of the reported spacecraft. So if we're talking more like recent chatter about the event, former detective Gary Hesseltine claims to have uncovered new information about the incident that brings everything we thought we knew into question. Surprisingly, he believes that the mind-boggling event might have actually taken place over 5 or 6 nights, having tracked allegedly 17 different sightings. 17. In simple terms, this case is very different from most other UFO cases because it's not one event. It's a series of events over consecutive nights. Now this is what he said in an interview. For a long time, it was believed there were only like 2 events on 2 nights. But then, over time, more details came out, and we were pretty happy that it was, like 3 events over 3 nights. He said, as a former detective, when I reinvestigated this, I did it in a chronological way, as best I could, to break down the incidents and the different people involved. And in the conclusion of my book, there were 17 different timed events involving numerous personnel over what is likely to be now a 5 to 6 day period. So new information came to me that dates the first incident to be the 23rd of December, which before that, nobody ever heard of that. However, our author claims that there was more to this incident than what has been made public, suggesting that it all started with Airman Steve Wagner on December 23rd. So, just before Christmas Eve, it is said that Wagner investigated a strange incident near the east gate of Woodbridge, as something had reportedly come down amongst the trees. Alongside 2 others, Wagner reportedly went out to investigate, and in the book, so non-human, it's claimed these guys found something unexpected. So, Steve says what they came across were like little depressions in an equilateral triangle in this little clearing near the trees. Now what he said was really significant because the depressions were all the same size and shape. They were approximately 5 foot wide, which that's not little. So the 23rd of December, if the day is accurate, and he said like I'm pretty certain it was before Christmas, this whole thing is a lot bigger than what happened on the night of like Boxing Day. So kind of significant, as it's been quite a long period of time. This author has largely relied on the corroboration of witness accounts to evidence these claims. Now, alongside Wagner, the former detective has also investigated a number of other key witnesses. We're talking Jim Peniston, Ed Kebesang. We're talking Larry and Sergeant Adrian Bustinza. Now, we've got those claims that 3 separate unexplained events also took place on December 27th, 6 on the 28th, and only 1 on the 29th. One of the boldest claims regards U.S. Lieutenant Bonnie Tamplin, who allegedly encountered an unknown object near the site while driving. This reportedly caused her to crash into a ditch, having lost complete control of her vehicle. The former detective even claims she was relieved from her duties after the incident and returned to the U.S. in distress. So while folks were allegedly convinced these shapes were an alien spacecraft, once again, like I mentioned before, it's been brushed off as like a prank played on the US Air Force. Now, at the time, Britain's Special Air Services were said to have regularly tested the US security by probing the nearby perimeters of Woodbridge, which allegedly stored nuclear warheads at the time of the Cold War. Now, on one occasion, to be specific, the Brits were allegedly subjected to a brutal interrogation and not treated nicely by US security before being released 18 hours later after authorities intervened. Now, writer Brenda Butler of Suffolk has grown up amused by some of the UFO tourism that has grown up around the forest. So she co-wrote the 1986 book on the case called Sky Crash, and she thinks the US found a Russian satellite. She's like, it's gotta be something to do with the Americans or the Russians or the war. There are loads of files still to be released, but there has been such a big cover-up, nobody will ever know what happened. She's like, I'd like to get to the bottom of it all, but I guess we never will. So one of the guards who was originally present at the event, John Burroughs, he's also written a book about it, because there's a lot of books out there. Now, this book is titled Weaponization of an Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, and this is where he outlines research that he says shows the incident was caused by experiments in harnessing an energy field in the forest. He's like, yeah, they were studying the energy field for different applications, specifically military use. Now, apparently the lighthouse was emitting a lot of electromagnetic frequencies towards the forest. That's how we got all those big bright lights. And he stresses, like, I never on the record to say it was a spaceship, because I didn't know. But what he saw was some sort of energy or plasma, which could be a form of intelligence. Now, as he and his colleagues approached, Mr. Burroughs said they saw like a white light silently explode and then a red, oval, sun-like object in the clearing. It lifted up through the trees and went back towards the coast. Now, this man who served in the US Armed Forces for 27 years, he's like, it's been a crazy amount of time since the encounter. Just when you think the story's over, something else happens. A 2020 documentary about this entire mess concluded by saying that the mystery has now reached legend status. We're talking like Loch Ness Monster, King Arthur. Academic David Clark said researchers were at an impasse, and the longer this goes on, the more it becomes, well, a legend. Now, this new film hears from former USAF personnel, UFO enthusiasts, skeptics, academics. The director says it examines the elements that have made this one of our great modern legends. Now, Mr. Ferson, who is the director, he grew up in Walton on the Naze in Essex, and he got interested in the story after going camping in the forest and seeing the beam from the lighthouse. He said reports of the sighting that included suggestions of car engines cutting out, burn markings found in the forest, could have been influenced by films. Now, academic researcher into the UFO reports, Dr. David Clark, said in the film, like, he's like, okay, maybe it was a lighthouse, but it might have been some natural phenomena. That's besides the point. We've reached an impasse. There are those who can only see it in black and white terms. Aliens, or people from the future came here. Or it's the skeptical version. People are lying, or they've been misled by ordinary things. The more this is elaborated on, the more it becomes a legend. So, turns out, when it comes to UFO events in the UK, there was actually another notable one about 4 hours away from this one. So Captain Ray Bauer was flying a routine 45-minute flight from Southampton on April 23rd of 2007, when he and his passengers saw 2 UFOs as they approached their destination. The Jersey Airport Radar Control recorded the 2 large yellow cigar-shaped objects for over 55 minutes. Now, another pilot flying a plane near this one also confirmed the presence and location of these mysterious aircrafts. BBC Radio also reported that visitors in a hotel had noticed and inquired about 2 bright yellow objects in the sky. Now, during an address while addressing the US National Press Club in 2007, the captain said, like, the British Civil Aviation Authority knew within 20 minutes of the sighting what was seen, as described in a flight log, facts directly to the relevant office. Now, despite the pilot's openness about the incident, the cooperation of the military, and countless eyewitness reports from passengers and people on the ground, it's still a mystery. So, how would this entire area be kind of prone to alien stuff? Well, within the leafy surroundings of the forest was a mass extinction event sort of thing, military airfield, which at the time was occupied by the United States Air Force. So here's the thing. In the 90s, that airfield started to get used less and less and less. And with the end of the Cold War, the USAF presence was kind of phased down. It was announced that the airfield would be closed, and the whole thing would just sort of be inactive. So what if the military cover-up was just so the military could use this airfield as sort of a like UK Area 51, a place to quietly store store the UFOs that crashed in the area without having to transport them too far and risk exposure. Makes sense to me. And that's it for me once again, folks. I've been Alexa, your resident ookie spooky girly. See y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.